Hey, it's Soul, and I already regret doing this recording after looking at myself in the thing. It's my day off day, and I'm out of hair product. But that's how you know that what I have to say today is pretty important. So, out of pity, if you could like the video, subscribe, and if you're feeling it, go ahead and toss me onto your second screen. Please don't look at me. But let's talk, or let me talk. Once upon a time, in the earliest days of World of Warcraft, there were two kinds of endgame. There was PvP through the honor system, and there was raiding. You had your big group content, and everything else just sort of steered us towards that direction, towards that top level gameplay. And for over 10 or so years, the likes of dungeons were just like stepping stones towards raid content or PvP or whatever. The daily heroic, it was just a quick errand to get some resources or badges or emblems or elder coins or some other currency. And it wasn't until Mists of Pandaria when the winds started to shift, thanks to challenge mode dungeons and the prizes that we got from that. And that repeated during Warlords of Draenor, but also we had the harder mythic difficulty. That came about during that time. So dungeons were growing to become this third pillar of endgame content, right next to high-level PvP and raiding. And then with Legion, it blossomed into mythic keystone dungeons, which, fast forward to today, they're firmly set as this third pillar of endgame content, or the big three, as I call them. So what makes the big three the big three? Blizzard and the World of Warcraft team, they created the concept of seasons a couple of expansions ago, where you have a new season and you got a new raid, and you got your raiding reset, you got your fresh raiding for PvP, and you got now a fresh raiding and a new affix for mythic keystone dungeon stuff. And the seasonal dungeon concept is still evolving. Like right now, we're in the middle of this whole experimental season. Like, what happens when we rotate all the dungeons from season to season rather than just change up the affixes? But anyway, with each season comes a new floor for gearing, or a new floor for item level, and a path to max it out before doing it all over again. And obviously, I'm oversimplifying all these things. Like the big three, it's not made equal. It's not perfect, but it's what we have. So this is supposed to be a video about professions. I clickbaited you here for a reason, and it's to inform you that just like during Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor, the winds have been shifting. And Dragonflight, the upcoming expansion, Dragonflight, might be the expansion where, again, what was once considered a stepping stone could now blossom into this bona fide pillar of content. I'm talking about professions. It's got all the trappings, the good, the bad, the time-gated of what we would expect from seasonal raiding and dungeons and PvP. I'm going to point those out in just a second. I just mentioned that professions have more or less been like a stepping stone. It's had a mixed history of bearing items that were sometimes like the best in slots, but most often they were not. Professions are very different from the big three because professions are not really like a place. It's not an instanced thing that you walk into or you queue up for. Professions are the world. It's the herbs and the ore that you pick up from the ground. It's the mobs you kill and the raw gold that is used to buy things from the auction house to be turned into ingots that become a sky golem. So if you have a profession, you're part of that system. If you don't have a profession, but you happen to buy and sell things from the auction house, you're still a part of that system. There's no weekly lockouts for professions where, there's no great vault for professions, but, there are daily cooldowns, there are limited resources, and there are different forms that serve as barriers of entry. Shadowlands tried to make professions relevant with legendaries, and that was a mistake because it didn't make professions relevant exactly. it made them required to meaningfully participate in Big 3 content. So that's the difference there. That's no way to get people to appreciate what I still think is a very important part of the world of Warcraft, but I think the WoW team has learned lessons from that past, and well, now they've positioned themselves to make professions not just relevant, but to be an independent and meaningful endgame. If you've looked at all of my different coverage, my previous coverage, I've been taking a pretty close look at each of the professions, understanding specializations and crafting difficulty and recrafting and all sorts of other stuff. I admit that what I'm sharing with you today is a bunch of facts that's taped together with headcanon and speculation, but I'm convinced that in this expansion, professions will be given what I guess I'm going to call the season treatment, just like mythic keystone dungeons and raids and PvP. And you might have made the same connections if you've been paying attention to the blue posts or other videos, or if you've just been thinking about this on your own. But if not, strap in and maybe put on that tinfoil hat, because, well, here we go. Yay. We start with the upcoming launch of the Dragonflight expansion. And at the start of it, everyone's going to be, leveling, eventually getting to max level, earning honor, mastering those dungeons on, the relevant dungeons on Mythic, skilling up professions, of course, and building the Dragonflight economy with all the crap that we've been picking up. It's reasonable to expect that during this time, crafters will be able to create like all sorts of items, all sorts of fun stuff, but they won't be able to create a single endgame piece of gear. And specifically, I'm talking about the gear that you can craft or eventually recraft into like a perfect, top level, best in slot mythic gear piece. No one's going to be able to make that stuff for the same reason that PvPers can't get gladiator gear during the preseason, why raiders can't get heroic and mythic raid gear and so on and so forth, because the season hasn't started. The raid hasn't even opened yet, so of course you're not going to be able to get access to that stuff. Thanks to Shadowlands, and I believe even Battle for Azeroth, we're kind of used to waiting for certain items to be accessible for the purpose of crafting. I'm not saying that we love it, right? But just that we're accustomed to it. Some of you recall the crafter's marks, I believe. Yeah, the crafter's mark that was used to boost basic max level gear into something better, or at least something current. And then there was the special mark that let you have one piece of gear, usually like a ring or a neck, that lets you get to near heroic item level, something like that. And then, of course, there was the special crafting reagents for legendary gear, which were, better than everything else. Now, all of those things could only be accessed after the season started. And the way I'm seeing it, it's going to be no different here in Dragonflight. So right now I'm going to put up a screenshot, I hope, of a crafting recipe where there are two kinds of reagents that I'm totally confident are going to be, season-specific reagents. In Season 1, they're called Sparks of Ingenuity and Primal Chaos. Now, Sparks of Ingenuity, they don't drop necessarily, but they come from very specific quests that you start seeing at max level. I completed a few of them, and I got a few of these sparks, but according to developer posts that we've been reading, these quests are supposed to be spread across weeks. So, maybe we'll see one every week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe longer, but they're time-gated, basically. I know, it sounds horrifying, and we'll revisit these sparks later. Primal Chaos has not appeared on the alpha yet, anywhere that I know of, but we already know what this is supposed to be. It's going to be something similar to Cosmic Flux. It's going to drop in all sorts of endgame, including outdoor content, and there's a lot of different outdoor content where they could award this Primal Chaos. It's not only used to make crafted gear, but to upgrade it to higher item levels. Like if you get 100 of this Primal Chaos, you can then combine them to create a Primal Infusion. And then when you use it, when crafting, ta-da, you're now approaching heroic raid item level gear without even so much as walking into a dungeon. So that's why these most likely won't be seen until the season begins. I mean, it'd be pretty messed up to have gear that, that strong before the raids, the dungeons, and the PvP stuff started ramping up. Now, there's an additional barrier, an additional side effect to crafted gear that you can only wear at most 5 pieces. If you happen to try to wear more, you can, but you're also going to get a debuff that basically makes you useless in a fight. But that got me really curious too. It's like, why did the WoW team go about it in that way? Why not just have an equip limit and not let us put the gear on at all? Like, it's worked like that for years. We're sort of used to that. So this next part is definitely speculation. Pure speculation, I'd say. But it's also crucial for professions to be this seasonal system that I hope, or I expect, that it's turning into. So in the past, how should I do this? In the past, we had Valor caps. We've had Conquest caps. I mean, we do, but right now we don't, but you know what I mean. We've had these ways to prevent extreme circumstances where some players can get too powerful too fast, and that would disrupt the whole ecosystem of how geared players interact with people who are like coming in later or just not going in as hard as others. Those of you who are trying to get into +2s right now and they can't, that's testament to the dark side of having a season without these sort of caps. And of course, we can debate the necessity of caps, but for now, let's just accept that they're more than likely going to be back in Dragonflight. And just like the big 3, professions are going to need a cap of sorts in order to prevent them from also getting out of control. It happens to certain degrees, but the intent of the WoW team here is to try and keep a relatively even playing field between Mythic Plus and raids and PvP and probably professions too. Like, they prefer to not have like one path to gearing to be so superior to the others that it makes people feel bad. Now, I know they messed up before. The point is that Dragonflight is trying to control the rate at which high-end crafted epics can be acquired. Individually, the way that these sparks work, individually everyone will have an opportunity to get one, used for crafting every few weeks or so. Okay. Now, thanks to crafting orders, it'll be possible, not super likely, but possible with a lot of gold for individuals to obtain 5 crafted pieces faster. They just need to shell out enough gold or just kind of social engineer themselves away to be able to have other crafters kind of give up their spark for them. Or there might be another method. They might be able to set up their own crafting alts and use their sparks to fulfill their own crafting orders. It's kind of weird, but right now crafting orders, they're not testable, and so we don't know 100% sure if we can create and fulfill our own crafting orders from alts. But anyway, whatever the case, thanks to the limit of 5 crafted epics, I don't see why this shouldn't be that big of a deal. But if in the mid-season, like a couple months into it, when Valor and Conquest caps are expected to be lifted, I don't see why the equipment shouldn't also be, the equip limit, I don't see why that shouldn't be relaxed a bit too. Or to have those sparks of ingenuity be more regularly available. Like, okay, now going forward, they're going to drop at a rate of 1 from like the world boss. Just go out and kill it, but you can get it every week. It could be something like that. This is the first time professions are trying to really encroach on the big 3, so I think the WoW team is setting themselves up. They're putting these things in place, but they're also going to play it by ear. Maybe they won't relax the limit, or maybe they'll do it in very small increments, or maybe I'm just wrong in my interpretation altogether. It's fair game. I don't think this is a stretch though, because the way that this seems to play out feels very, very plausible. So if professions are going to be treated more like seasons, what's going to happen in the next season? We got to cover that too. So we're talking about this. It's funny, we're talking about this in the alpha, but and so we're very firmly in the realm of speculation. It's just that from how professions look right now, the formula is already in place. I just talked about it. So imagine the 10.1 patch notes. It'll probably say something along the lines of, well, sparks of ingenuity, they're gonna no longer be produced. Instead, a new reagent, Sparks of Ingenuity Season 2 will be available in a new series of quests, just like the original Sparks. And they're going to start appearing after Season 2 begins, just like before, with a very controlled supply. And when this reagent is used in crafting recipes, here's the difference. When this reagent is used in like the old crafting recipes even, it's going to provide additional bonus item level straight away to reflect the game-wide Season 2 bump in item level. Makes sense. Meanwhile, Primal Chaos, I'm guessing maybe it won't drop anymore. Now they're going to have Primal Chaos Season 2. It only works when used with Season 2 Sparks of Ingenuity, but otherwise it'll function the same way. Just like before, they're going to come back with this equip limit of 5 Season 2 pieces that you can wear. But again, after so long, those restrictions might be relaxed or lifted. And then we move on to Season 3 and this loop begins all over again. Now, as plausible as that is, it sounds kind of boring, right? Because there aren't new things being introduced. Like, are there really going to be 0 new recipes with each season? I'm speculating again, but I think there can and will be a few new gear recipes that come in. So in the alpha, there are 2 kinds of high-level crafts. I've been talking about like these dragon-based crafts with, customizable item level and stats and embellishments. But there are other recipes available that have these unique requirements. Some of them have special effects. The downside is that you can't add embellishments, and I think in some cases you can't customize the stats either, but it opens up the idea that new recipes can be added for the purpose of introducing new effects, maybe new transmog, basically stuff that's themed after the new raid and such. I've done a lot of testing and learning of every profession update in Dragonflight so far, and I am more than convinced, I am all hopiumed up, that Dragonflight is going all in with making professions into a seasonal endgame sort of thing. For some folks, it's going to feel like their method of progression. For others, it's going to be like this competitive thing they're going to choose between. And for others, again, it's going to be complementary, and for others, they're going to totally ignore it, which is cool because all those options are plausible and you're not really hurting no matter which direction you go. The question then is, of course, are people going to buy into it? Like, you know me, I tend to lean on the optimistic side of things, so my immediate answer is yes, absolutely. I feel like they're trying to do this right. The WoW team is trying to do this right because as a system, professions are really trying to avoid pissing off the incumbent big 3. It's no secret that among the big 3 players, there's this sort of wrestle between, which content is the easiest to farm to get the best gear the fastest. Unlike big 3 content, professions and world content, which are very intertwined together, they don't involve that same kind of high skill gameplay. But you've got to believe me, seriously, you got to believe me when I say it's going to take some real work in order to create a mythic level, perfect quality weapon or trinket or ring or piece of armor. You see something, you see someone with that walking around and they put a ton of work and gold into it, and it was made by someone who has a lot of talent and time on their hands. I honestly don't see professions as a pillar of gameplay that's going to necessarily diminish the likes of Mythic Plus or high-end raiding or rated PvP. It's not going to feel like a required side venture that someone must participate in because it has something overwhelmingly powerful that can't be found anywhere else. It's an option. But for those who do not participate in the big 3, professions may in fact serve to be like this fully fleshed out endgame that gets the entire economy working together to provide materials, and then you'll have this more local community to develop the skills necessary to provide the gear. The only bits of information that we're missing really are the reassurances that the equip limit is going to relax over the course of a season, followed by, of course, what happens in the next season. The limitations and the time gating and the resource limits, they're annoying if you hyper focus on those things. So people in the comments that are railing on that, I totally get it. And yet they're also a balance check to push back against the notions of like the pay to win advantages and kind of protect against abuse. So if the WoW team gets this right, Dragonflight will be the birth of the big four, and that's exciting. Of course, like everything else, like every early start, like with Mythic Plus and everything else, it's going to be flawed. I'm talking this up, but there's bound to be stuff that stinks. And yet, I see the intent with all of these interconnected systems. There's a plan in place here that goes beyond just the first season. And if this works, we're going to see this grow and evolve for expansions to come. And I've run out of things to say.